Welcome to another episode of Expected Buffalo, the podcast, brought to you by One Pie Pizza on Seneca Street in West Seneca, open 7 days a week from 9 to 8. I was wondering how long I'd be able to go. Still recovering from my weekend battle. And immediately when I started talking, it's hard to feel it in my throat. So we'll see how long we can go here. But we'll try to push through before the voice gives out on me. I missed this, honestly. When I first started doing these multiple days a week shows, I wondered how much, if I would get sick of it or it'd be too much. And no, I've missed the last few I haven't done. And usually we have Mailbag Thursday here, but since I missed the last few days of podcasts on Monday and Wednesday, and then the deadline being tomorrow, it made sense to kind of do this as a regular podcast. So here we are, less than 24 hours away from the 2025 NHL trade deadline. I really don't want to talk about the team tonight, especially after that game. There was a lot of frustrating things once again, and mental mistakes and bad goaltending and a whole bunch of other stuff that we have a month and a half essentially to dive through. So we'll set that aside for tonight, and we'll talk about the fun stuff. Well, maybe the fun stuff, the deadline, what could happen, some ideas, um, things in of that nature. Well, we'll start things. I think is the hot rumor of the evening, and that is JJ Peterka. So there were some connections to the New York Rangers. As I tweeted out, all I can really share with you, the feedback that I got was that there's nothing there. So I don't think that's going to happen. Could be wrong, but what I've gotten back is there's nothing there. It does seem like it'd be surprising if Peterka does move at all before tomorrow's deadline. Now, that doesn't preclude something happening in the summer. And I think that's an interesting conversation that we could carry into the next month and a half of just trying to burn time, and then into the off season, of course, because we'll have an early off season to get into all of that and dive through that. So I think Peterka at that time is going to be an interesting conversation. But right now, he's, I think, in that same boat with Talking Cousins and Byram, some of those big names where we might not see that happen by tomorrow's deadline with them going somewhere. Of course, you never say never. A conversation could spark up this time of the year. We saw a tweet about Pedersen being maybe back out there again, the Canucks taking some calls. And we'll see how that goes. If that, is reality or that's something that's really happening, then the Sabres, of course, would find themselves back in the midst of that as they were maybe a month ago. So again, it can be a wild day. Things can pop up out of nowhere. I'm certainly not looking to sit here at 11:12 at night and be Debbie Downer and tell you that nothing is going to happen tomorrow and to, I don't know, be sad about it. But it seems like right now there's nothing, I guess that's close, I would say. There's nothing really, at least that was the feedback I've gotten as of a couple hours ago. Nothing seemingly close right now. I do think that they'll do one or two things. The excitement of those one or two things, I don't know what they're going to be. Like, I feel pretty confident they're probably going to try to do their best to find somewhere for Yoki Haru, but you're looking at a late draft pick probably. I don't know. In this market, maybe it's a mid-round pick for Yoki Haru as a rental, right shot defenseman, a little bit younger. Maybe somebody gives you a fourth best case scenario for that. So I feel like that's something that probably happens. Zucker, we'll see. The vibe there has been, from what I've picked up on, is they're working towards that deal. While also, there's been interest and calls coming in and stuff like that they're not pushing anything away. I just think, like, from some of the vibes that I've been getting, and then if you dot connect, really, that his name is just not out there in trade conversations. There's even some trade boards he's not even on. I think the Sabres' desire is to keep him. I feel like that they believe they can do that. I honestly thought that they would have something agreed to by now. It doesn't mean they can't get something done by tomorrow. So, in his regard, as of now, my expectation would be that he would be here after the deadline as well. He's he's a player when you look at the market right now that you're in that you would be probably and maybe rightfully so expecting a big return from what has gone on other trades. Other teams have gotten back in their deals, but the catch here that always has to be considered. While yes, it's a possibility the return could be good. There's always that factor of the retention with this team. I'm not saying that they'll never retain on a player, but we have the evidence they haven't retained on anything since Taylor Hall in 2021. So moving a player with a $5 million cap hit is pretty difficult this time of the year if you're not going to retain on it. And all of these big trades you're seeing, well, decent sized trades you're seeing that get pretty surprising returns, if you will, all have retention in them. And the Sabres just don't seem to be about that. For better or worse, I'm not trying to get into a spending argument here. I've done enough of that over the last 48 hours, but it is what it is. And if they're willing, I think, to retain, probably up to 50%, then yeah, I think they can get a good return from him if that's and also the injury depends too. I think that is playing a little bit of a factor here too. Um, it's certainly not encouraging probably the teams around the league to hear that there's some frustration about him getting his injury recovered and back on the ice. They're trying different treatments. Not ideal. And, I think when you add in all those factors, and of course the factors at the very beginning that they want to keep him, that likely leads you to, him staying past the deadline tomorrow. So saying all of that, that doesn't really leave you in the position to expect a dynamic trade deadline or a fun trade deadline from the Sabres tomorrow. Because we already talked about, we crossed them off. Peterka doesn't seem like he's going to go for tomorrow. Zucker maybe will put 50-50 at best, leaning towards 60-40 staying. It seems pretty quiet on Cousins and Byram and those guys right now. So then where are we at? We're at Yoki Haru, Peyton Krebs, Matthias Samuelson, anybody like that? I don't know. Is somebody going to take Connor Clifton off your hands? Does Reimer maybe get something? It's not setting up to be exciting. We'll just put it that way. And I think how you could get around that in terms of that hockey trade that Adams is after, that he keeps telling everybody who will listen to him that he's trying to do something big and then make a big hockey trade. I think how you can get around that is if you find something you can do that involves using your own assets, your own picks and prospects. Maybe there's a guy that you could go run down that a team would be okay to take futures, and you don't have to give up somebody off your roster. And then in the summer, you can move some of those roster guys in a hockey trade where it's easier to do that and where teams are more open to do that. Like, when 3/4 of the league believes they're in the playoff race, and that's why it's such a seller's market right now. That's a possibility. Who those guys would be, I don't know. Is Seattle want to take futures for Jared McCann? Because that's somebody you consider doing that for. And then Sabres futures, like if a first round pick's included, that's difficult because right now you are tracking heavy towards the top 5 pick. And you'll likely, top 10 protect that or whatever, lottery protect it. But that could hurt some of the value on it, of course, unless you're a team who believes the Sabres just are never going to be good. And then you get an unprotected 26 first round pick next year, and you're all cool with that. It's. I think at the end of the day, to kind of wrap this up, and then what I want to go to is maybe some like fun ideas we can kick around that maybe not reality, but just some things that have kind of floated through my head over the last 24 to 48 hours. But what I was going to say is like, it's going to be really disappointing that if 4:00 rolls around tomorrow and from Prague, even we're at the opening training camp, to 4:00 on March 7th, the roster is the exact same minus the Yoki Haru trade. That's just a terrible look. Terrible look. For a team that has lost 13 straight, for a team that's in the midst of a 5-game losing streak when their coach called out after the Four Nations break, they had to do these certain things to try to at least get themselves in it, and they've just fallen flat on their face. It's a really bad look, and he being Adams can try to spin it any way his heart desires. When the deadline is over, it's it takes two, and I don't know. We didn't get the right offers, or everyone to give us futures. We don't want futures. Whatever, man. It's a massive failure. Massive failure. There's no other way to put it. There's no sugarcoating it. There's no anything around that. And really, kind of like, I've gone back and forth on it a lot this season, and I'm maybe getting a little bit off topic here. And I promise after this, I'll get back to trade stuff. But I've gone back and forth a lot on what this team should really do. From a coaching staff, from the head coach, from the general manager. In every game that goes by, every day that goes by, I'm seeing myself fall more into the category of like, I think just everything needs to change. And that's where I was during the 13 losing streak. And I started to drift back a little bit. Well, we're seeing Lindy start to, get to him a little bit. If Adams can pull something off here, maybe to kind of set himself up going forward, maybe start to believe in that a little bit. But here we are. Like, I think the team again is kind of going backwards here. There's a lot of issues that continue to crop up. The power play is just so maddening, especially that 6-on-3 at the end tonight was just brutal. But really, it keeps coming back to, I think this needs to be a full sweep, and you really can't do a reset of your roster in today's NHL. It's too difficult to recover. It takes way too long. By the time you do that, some of your key players are going to want out, and then you're kind of back on the hamster wheel, just running in circles again. So I think that's the easiest way, is to get some fresh new eyes in this organization, to look at this roster, to make the changes necessary, whether it's one or two pieces, and then to try to get this team to go in the right direction. It's becoming clearly evident, whether there are restrictions to any regard in terms of making moves or finances or whatever, that this general manager cannot work within them to put a winning team on the ice. So with that being the case, like, you gotta change it up. You gotta try something, and just it's gonna be so hard to just sell to fans in the off season. Like, same GM, same coach, mostly the same. Especially if you bring Zucker back, like, you're okay now. We're tracking towards the same roster again. We're with minimal changes. That we've done that now 2 years in a row. Yeah, it's not ideal. It's not good. But again, like I said in the beginning, I don't want to get too deep into that, because we could talk about that over the next, I don't know, 3-4 months. Like, we talk about that every single year, and that's whatever. Okay, so let's get back to some hockey stuff, some trade stuff, if you will. What are some things that have been rolling around in my mind? Should we start with Mikko Rantanen? Maybe that's the most kind of wild thing that I've been thinking about over the last 24 hours. First of all, the entire situation with Carolina is just, talk about an all-time blunder, man. They're trying their best here to save face, but I don't know if you recover from that. Anyways, so I'm thinking about, like, of course, this is a small, realistic possibility of happening, but like, what would be the most you would give to Carolina to just have 2 months with Rantanen? Just bring him here. Hey, man, show him around Buffalo. show them the, I guess, one finished player you'll have on your team still, and just try to see if maybe he would sign here. I mean, it's all just unlikely, but really, I think the thought like I wanted to go to is like, what is the most you would give? You're probably not giving like any of your major roster players, which like at the end of the day, like if you're not going to give a major roster play to Carolina, they're going to hang up the phone on you. But I don't know. Like I never really got to like a really solid answer. Like what in my own head? Like what's the most I would give? I don't know. Like would they take Jack Quinn? Can I give him Cousins and get something else back with Rantanen? But like again, they're not going to do that. Like that's silly. So really, I mean, I think realistically, like at the end of the day, it's kind of like it's why I started there because it's simply just not going to happen. But it's something that's been kicked around in my brain. Like, what would you do? And it would probably have to be futures. It'd have to be your own rental. So, like, I thought about like maybe like before Greenway signed, would Greenway sucker in something else or whatever. But yeah, it's not realistic. But something that's really kicked around my head to see if it's something that I could land on reasonably, have some fun with, but there's nothing really there. Okay, moving beyond Marner. Favorite ideas that I've thought about here going into tomorrow. I mentioned one in Jared McCann. I think that would be really good. I think that would fit from a forward perspective. Score, top 6 forward. 1 year, I believe it's the 1 year on his contract remaining, pretty cheap at around $5 million. And I think that's doable. I think you can find a deal that works with Seattle to make that happen. Of course, what you have to run into is trade protection because every single person in the world has trade protection there. So, or anywhere. So, that could end it right there. But if that was a possibility, that's something I would do too. Matias Maselli is somebody that I've liked the player for a while from Utah. His name is out there. It seems that they're dangling him around. I feel like Utah and Buffalo could be a perfect team to find a hockey trade between the two of them. The difference, the thing with Maselli that I think some people won't like is his size. He's 5'11", but really there's a lot of offensive upside. There's a lot of speed there. And if you look at some of the underlying numbers around him, there are signs of, bounce back. He's not having a good year this year. That's certainly nothing to dispute there. And that's obviously the reason why he's on the market right now, or at least Utah is considering that. So maybe that's like, could you do a Quinn for Maselli? Like, would that work for both sides? Like that is kind of where I went to. I'll take my guy who's underachieving, your guy who's underachieving. Let's swap them and see if we both end up happy at the end of the day. Because that's, I think, a trade that I would do, 100 times out of 100. It's a swap, and you go from there and see if that works for you. And yeah, I was trying to think of anything else off the my head as like a swap idea, but no, nothing there. So he's a guy that I thought about. So that's another forward at the top of my list. Is there really anybody else? This year is so hard because there's really nobody. There's nobody that they're connected to, and that's why I think we're set up for maybe a dud day tomorrow. But let's try to keep the positive ideas of flows going. I'm trying to think of a defenseman that maybe would be interesting. I mean, Connor Murphy is somebody I've eyed for a while, a big right shot defenseman. That would be a lot of fun to bring him in. I think he would be a really good fit for Power. That solid defensive defenseman, that veteran, that guy that can bring some stability in their own end of the zone. There's a lot of chaos for him right now. I think if you brought him in, that'd be a lot of nice stability. So yeah, that could be a fun option. Beyond that, like the Kings have a couple interesting guys. Like Brant Clark, I think is somebody that I would be interested in if Byram wasn't on the team, but you can't bring Brand Clark here because he's not very good defensively. And for the person who keeps asking about Braden Schneider in the comments, that's the same reason I have no interest in him. That is another big defenseman who does not know how to defend. His defensive numbers are really bad over the last few years. It's just, the thing with him, big, right shot, younger defenseman, cost controlled. That's all there, but you'd again, like you'd be sitting there with, one defenseman, Darlene, that can defend. You'd be sitting there with Byram, who, for the love of God, needs to get back with Darlene. That just not has gone well for the last two games without him, and even like the last week or two, that it's just really going poorly for Byram. And then Power, we know about his defensive deficiencies that he has in his zone right now as he tries to work through that. So I think if you were to add Clark or Schneider, those don't fix what you need. Those are two guys that, they have parts of their game which are good, but it's not what you need. So neither of those really make any sense at all. Jamie Alexiak, people are asking about. Oh man, Alexiak. It depends on the cost. I think that I might be interested for the right price. I've never really loved the player, to be perfectly honest. I've always just thought that he gets beat a lot. With his skating, and it's just, not great overall. Again, it would depend on cost. It's really not one of my favorite ideas. It's not the worst by any means. It really, for me, it comes down to a cost thing for him. What would the cost be to acquire him? And then I would have to go from there. Luke Shen. Luke Shen, if you are an avid listener of this podcast, you know how I feel about Luke Shen, which is that I am not a fan. Anthony and I have a famous podcast, maybe from last year, 2 years ago, where we go to battle randomly, not planned, in a podcast episode over Luke Shen. I'm just not a fan. Again, like, it's better, I guess. I don't even know if it's better than what you have right now, but you can consider it an upgrade, I guess. I mean, it's the same thing. Like, it's not a terrible idea in some regards, but it's not good. It's not going to make you that much better. It's needle mover. That's what we're looking for. It's not really a needle mover, especially from a defensive aspect. So no, I mean, that just, I probably maybe prefer Alexiak over Shen, to be honest, between the two. I'll just keep running off names people are throwing out there. Simon Nemec, young defenseman. I think in the right scenario, in the right trade scenario, you could sell me on that. I have not had a chance to watch some of his AHL games or even NHL games to get a more of a accurate feel on him. But I just have concerns. Same thing about his defending, especially being that young. You just don't know for sure. And I think what they need right now is a proven commodity. And I don't think you really have that in Nemec. I wouldn't turn it away in the right trade scenario for sure. They have nothing in their system right now on the right side defense. So even if it's just kind of bulking up your system, I wouldn't. I wouldn't really go there. I'd maybe try to find a different type of deal. Besides Nemec again, depending on what it would be. The voice is going here, so I've only got me for a few more minutes. What else? Is there anything else fun? Does anybody else have any ideas they want to spit into the chat here that we're kind of kicking around, having fun with? Those are my real crazy fun guys. I'm trying to pull up my trade list here to see if I have anybody else interesting that's realistic. Bjorkstrand was one of my favorite ideas, but that went out the door the other day, so can't really talk about that one because he would have been somebody that we did discuss today. Oh, Brandon Carlo, that's a good one. Carlo is definitely somebody that I would be interested in. I don't think he's as good as maybe some of the reputation is. But I think of the guys that we talk about with Alexiak, Shen, Nemec, Clark, all those guys we kind of just went through. I think Carlos had my favorite idea out of all of that. Now, there's certainly a possibility that, coming out of that Boston defense, that some of that is covering up for, and maybe overinflating some of his defensive numbers. But I do think that, there's strong enough numbers there defensively that you could look at and believe in at this point in his career and how long he's put into this league. Again, I think that's another guy you can say is a good fit with Power. Because really, ultimately, that's kind of what you're looking for until you find out that you're really not looking for that and he's not in the team anymore, which I don't think is going to happen. But maybe that's really what you're targeting. Here is finding him the right partner. But from a pure match standpoint, like I'm looking now, like at Carlos. It's kind of funny looking at his micro stats here from Corey's data, all three zones. The offensive numbers are pretty bad, but if he's with Power, you don't need that. Like the entries, the offensive numbers are bad. But really, I think where he succeeds is the retrievals, is the exits are pretty good. And in particular, his entry defense. Now, if you remember from maybe a month ago, I put together the article on Power, and then I guess up on the podcast too. I went through what he was succeeding in and where his struggles really were to kind of make sure everybody understood the full picture of where he is struggling. And one of those areas was on his entry zone defense. And we saw it like a little bit today. Like I'm not going to get entirely on him on the one goal where Thompson doesn't cover his guy, but really, the Tampa Bay player comes in the zone and Power rightfully rides him along the wall and with the stick and puts him out of the play essentially. The Tampa Bay forward throws a puck to the middle of the ice. Thompson doesn't get a stick on it. Luukkonen doesn't close his legs, and the puck trickles through for a goal. But in an entry zone defense situation, maybe you want to tell Power there, well, if you squeeze him out, there's no play. If you remove him from the puck instead of just, riding him out with your stick, which isn't a bad play, he's out of the play. There's nothing he can do. There shouldn't be if everything behind you is working properly. There's nothing he's going to be able to do from where he was. Throwing a puck to the middle of the ice from the wall should be a turnover or at least a low quality scoring chance. So something like what happened shouldn't have happened. But still, it's a learning point in you played it fine. But if you were to do this and just remove player from puck against the wall, then there's no possibility of what happened, even though it's not entirely your fault. It's the team behind you didn't do their job. So, anyways, Carlo is a good, is a good entry zone defender, which could be a good match if you're going to put him with Power. So yeah, going through all of that, I think of the ideas we've talked about so far, that Carlo seems to be the one that would make the most sense and I'd probably be the most interested in. Noah Dobson, I would say, yeah, that all seems like contract stuff from a couple months ago. That has quieted down, it appears. So, yeah, I would have really think Dobson's that realistic. I think that was some contract stuff between the two sides that came up. Basically, if you're not going to come to the table and find something that works, then we're just going to move you. And, that's a tactic that teams have used plenty of times in the past. So, and I don't really think we're going to see much, from a trade in Dobson, I guess I could say. Okay, 30 minutes. The voice is going, folks. The voice is going. So yeah, I guess to wrap it up, we'll see what happens tomorrow. I hope that multiple things really do go down. Because I enjoy fun things to talk about. Like even like chasing the Peterka stuff. While I think there's not a great match with the Rangers, it was still fun to kind of go through, all of that. But yeah, no, realistically, like I said near the beginning, um, I'm not confident we're going to see that. I think what we're most likely going to see are one or two small things, and then a general manager that tells you that he worked really hard to try to get something to happen and couldn't find a partner, couldn't find offers he liked, and so yeah, that was the end of it, and they didn't end up doing anything. And we'll go into the off season and we'll try these things, and we're not happy where we are right now, and it's not acceptable, and this and that and this and that, and like Emily Kaplan said today, he'll tell players it's a privilege to play in this league, and maybe that'll motivate them or something. Who knows? But yeah, so we'll see how tomorrow goes. If they do something significant, then maybe I'll be back on again to discuss that, or write something up. If they just move Henry Yokiharu, I'm definitely not going to be doing that, just to talk about that. So yeah. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening, bearing with me as I push through with the voice. I hope we have a fun day tomorrow. Enjoy one more sleep of letting those dreams marinate that everybody has, those favorite players' favorite ideas. And you never know, maybe somebody will actually have their dream come true tomorrow. You never know. So we'll have some fun tomorrow. Hopefully, at least if not the Sabres, maybe the rest of the league will give us something entertaining to talk about. And we will talk then. See ya.